The cotton fields of East Texas stretched endlessly beneath the scorching summer sun of 1843, their white bowls heavy with the promise of wealth. For some, for others, those same fields meant only suffering, separation, and a kind of death that happened while the heart still beat. This is the story of Samuel, an enslaved man who watched his world crumble when his master sold the woman he loved, and of the ancient power he called upon to restore balance in a land where law and morality had long abandoned the enslaved. Samuel had known slavery all his life, born into bondage on a Louisiana plantation before being sold east to Texas at age 15. Now 32, he had learned to navigate the impossible mathematics of survival, how much resistance invited the lash, how much submission preserved dignity, where the line lay between staying alive and truly living. He carried his mother's memory like a talisman, her whispered stories of Guinea and the spirits who watched over their people, even in this strange land of pine forests and endless cotton, had shaped him. She had died when he was 12, worked to death in the cane fields, but her voice lingered, teaching him that the old ways had not died, that power existed beyond the master's whip and the overseer's gun. If you're watching this story and feeling the weight of Samuel's world, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring these untold stories of resistance, survival, and the human spirit's refusal to be broken. Comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Your engagement helps these forgotten voices reach more people. The plantation where Samuel now lived belonged to Nathaniel Hartwell, a man whose cruelty was notorious even among other slaveholders in Harrison County. Hartwell had purchased the land 5 years earlier with money inherited from his father's shipping empire, determined to become a cotton baron in this newly settled territory. He approached slavery with the cold efficiency of a businessman, seeing human beings as nothing more than units of production, their value measured only in pounds of picked cotton or the price they might bring at auction. He kept meticulous records in leather-bound ledgers, noting each enslaved person's output, any signs of defiance, and their estimated market value. To Hartwell, Samuel was just, male Negro, strong build, age 32, value $1,200, satisfactory worker, but shows occasional defiance in eyes. Samuel had met Rose 3 years after arriving at the Hartwell plantation. She had been there since childhood, orphaned at 6 when her parents were sold separately to buyers in Mississippi. Rose possessed a quiet strength that drew Samuel to her immediately. She moved through the plantation's horrors with her head unbowed, her spirit intact despite everything that tried to crush it. They married in the traditional way of enslaved people, jumping the broom one Sunday evening, while other workers gathered to witness and celebrate this small assertion of humanity in a dehumanized world. Master Hartwell had given his permission, seeing potential profit in any children they might have, adding a blunt note in his ledger, breeding pair, both healthy stock. For 2 years, Samuel and Rose built something resembling a life within the narrow space allowed to them. They shared a small cabin at the edge of the quarters, its walls chinked with mud and moss, the floor packed earth. Rose grew herbs in a small plot behind their home, okra and greens to eat, but also plants her grandmother had taught her about, roots and leaves holding older knowledge. Samuel carved small wooden figures during the few hours of rest allowed on Sabbath days, his hands creating beauty as an act of resistance against a system designed to reduce him to a mere tool. They whispered to each other after dark about impossible dreams, freedom, a future where their children might know something other than bondage, a world where their love could exist without the constant threat of separation. That threat became reality on a humid morning in August, when Master Hartwell's fortunes shifted. A poor cotton crop the previous year, combined with gambling debts in Jefferson, created a cash crisis. Hartwell needed money fast, and in the economics of slavery, humans were the most liquid assets. He calculated which of his property could bring the highest immediate return. Rose, healthy and still young at 26, with years of productive labor ahead and able to bear children, represented significant value at auction. Samuel's worth lay in his strength and field experience, but Hartwell decided he could not afford to sell both. The plantation still needed workers. The choice was purely financial. Samuel first heard of the impending sale not from his master, but through whispers in the quarters. Old Jacob, who worked in the main house and overheard conversations not meant for enslaved ears, brought the news one evening. "Master's planning to sell Rose to a trader passing through next week," Jacob said quietly, his weathered face grave. "Heard him telling Mrs. at supper. Man's from Alabama, gathering a coffle to march south." The words hit Samuel like a blow. His vision blurred, his chest tightened. Around him, the familiar world of the quarters, the cooking fires, children playing despite exhaustion, the low hum of evening chatter seemed suddenly distant and unreal. Rose stood beside him, her hand finding his, grip tight enough to hurt. Neither spoke. No words could capture the particular agony of knowing the system they lived under could, at a master's whim, destroy the fragile shelter of love they had built. That night, lying beside Rose in their cabin, Samuel felt something awaken within him that had lain dormant since his mother's death. She had taught him about the spirits, the Labua who had crossed the ocean with their people, who remembered the old ways and could be called when human strength failed. His mother warned him such power came with a price, that the spirits demanded respect and sacrifice, that invoking them was never to be done lightly. But as he held Rose and felt her silent tears against his chest, Samuel knew some moments required more than human effort, more than prayer to a Christian God who seemed to favor only masters. "I won't let them take you," he whispered into the darkness. "I swear it on my mother's grave, on every ancestor who suffered this evil. I will find a way." Rose turned to him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight through the cabin cracks. "Samuel, what can we do? If we run, they'll hunt us with dogs. If we resist, they'll kill you and sell me anyway. This is the world we live in." "The world we live in," Samuel said, voice intense, "is not the only world that exists. My mother taught me things, Rose, old things, powerful things. I never thought I'd need them, but now—" He rose from their bed and moved to the small chest holding his few possessions. From beneath a false bottom, he removed a small cloth bundle, stained and worn. Inside were objects his mother had given him: a stone from Guinea, earth from an ancestor's grave, dried herbs, and a small carved figure representing Baron Samedi, the LWA of death and resurrection. "Tomorrow is Saturday," Samuel said. "Sunday, we have a few hours after morning chores. There's a place in the woods near the creek where it bends east. My mother took me there once. She said it was where the veil between worlds grows thin. I'm going to call on powers older than these white men ever thought to enslave us. I will ask for help, and I will offer whatever price is demanded." Rose watched with fear and hope. She had heard whispered stories of conjure and root work, of enslaved people calling on African spirits to punish cruel masters or move unseen past patrols. Such tales were told in hushed voices, half believed even by those who shared them. Yet they clung to life because sometimes hope demanded belief in powers beyond the visible world. The next day passed agonizingly slow. Samuel worked in the fields under the overseer's watchful eye, his body performing the motions while his mind raced ahead to the ceremony he would attempt. He had never performed a ritual himself. His mother had led such ceremonies in his childhood, and after her death, he had set the practices aside, unsure of his ability to bridge the worlds. But desperation and love created a courage beyond doubt. Sunday morning brought the usual routine, a few hours of enforced church attendance, where a white preacher lectured the enslaved congregation that obedience to masters was obedience to God, twisting scripture to justify chains. Samuel barely heard the words, his mind already in the woods, composing the prayers and invocations his mother had taught him. Beside him, Rose sat rigid, her face composed but concealing the terror and fragile hope within. As soon as they were released, Samuel gathered what he needed. He filled a small jug with water from the well, took cornmeal from the quarter's meager stores, and retrieved the bundle from his cabin. Rose wanted to come, but he insisted she stay behind. "If this works," he told her, "there may be consequences. Better that you can truthfully say you knew nothing." The woods at the edge of the plantation were thick with pine and oak, undergrowth dense with palmetto and vine. Samuel carefully made his way to the creek bend his mother had shown him years ago, a place where the water ran over smooth stones, and trees grew in a circular pattern, as if respecting some invisible boundary. The air here felt different, heavier, charged with a presence that made the hair on his arms rise. He cleared a small space on the ground, preparing for the work to come. He built an altar from stones he gathered from the creek bed. On it he placed his offerings with care. The cornmeal was shaped into a cross, the water was poured into a hollowed stone, Earth taken from his ancestors' grave was sprinkled in a circle around it all. He lit a small fire and fed it slowly with dry wood until the flames burned steady and clean. Then, holding the carved figure of Baron Sidi, he began to speak in a blend of English and broken pieces of African languages his mother had kept alive. These were words that carried the weight of many generations and the strength of an unbroken bloodline. "Spirits of my ancestors, hear me," Samuel said, his voice quiet but strong. "You who survived the crossing, you who endured the whip and the chain, you who died enslaved but were never broken in spirit, I call to you now. Baron Samedi, Lord of the crossroads between life and death, Keeper of justice denied, I call upon you. I ask for your presence. I offer my devotion, my respect, and my readiness to pay whatever price you demand." The forest around him seemed to grow stilty, the usual sounds of birds and insects fading into an unnatural silence. Samuel felt the air turn cold despite the summer heat. He saw the fire burn in colors fire should not have, deep purples and greens dancing among the red and orange flames. "I am Samuel, son of Adma, who came from Guinea, grandson of Kwame, who died in the cane fields of Louisiana. Heir to a line that reaches back to the old kingdoms before the ships arrived," Samuel continued, his voice gaining strength as the ritual deepened. "My wife, Rose, is to be sold away from me, ripped from my arms by a man who calls himself a master but is nothing more than a thief of souls. I ask for justice, Baron. I ask for balance. I ask that Nathaniel Hartwell pay for his crimes against humanity and that Rose and I be given the freedom stolen from us." The fire suddenly flared, throwing sparks into the still air. Samuel felt a presence gather in front of him, not fully seen but clearly real, a heavy pressure in the air, an ancient force fixing its attention on him. When the voice came, it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filled with an authority that made Samuel's bones ache. "You call on powers you barely understand, child of a dom," the voice said, neither male nor female, carrying the tones of many African tongues beneath the words. "You ask for justice in a land built on injustice, for balance in a system meant to stay crooked. Do you know what you are calling forth? Do you understand the cost of true justice?" Samuel lowered his head, fear and resolve fighting within him. "I know my mother taught me these ways for a reason. I know that sometimes human effort is not enough. I know I would rather die trying to save Rose than live knowing I did nothing while they took her from me. Whatever price you ask, I will pay it." Silence followed, thick and heavy, filled with judgment. Samuel felt as if he were being measured, his spirit weighed against a scale he could not see or understand. At last, the presence spoke again. The words brought no comfort, but they carried the final sound of an agreement being sealed. "Very well, Samuel, son of Adma. Your love is true, your desperation real, your willingness to sacrifice honest. I will grant what you ask, but know this. Justice, real justice, often looks like vengeance to those who benefit from wrongdoing. Nathaniel Hartwell will pay for his crimes, but the payment will come through you. You will be the tool of his fall, and you will bear the weight of what you do. The freedom you seek will come, but it will be born from acts that will mark you for the rest of your life. Do you accept these terms?" "I accept," Samuel said without pause, though he did not fully grasp what he had agreed to. "Use me as you must. I accept." The presence seemed to pour into him then, like icy water flooding his veins, carrying knowledge and strength he had not possessed moments earlier. He saw not clear visions of the future, but possible paths, choices that could be taken, chances that would appear. He understood that he had not been given simple magic or brute strength. Instead, he had been given clarity, perfect timing, and the hard resolve needed to do what must be done. When Samuel opened his eyes, the fire had burned down to glowing embers, and the sun had moved far across the sky. He had no sense of how much time had passed, minutes or hours, but he knew he was changed, as if something deep within him had been reshaped. He gathered the ritual items carefully, scattering the cornmeal for the spirits, pouring out the remaining water as an offering, and covering every sign of the ceremony. As he walked back toward the quarters, Samuel moved with a new sense of purpose. The world looked sharper, clearer, filled with patterns he had never noticed before. He saw weaknesses in the plantation's routines, the predictable habits of the overseer, the places where watchfulness grew thin. He understood that Hartwell's cruelty was matched only by his pride, and pride always created openings. Rose was waiting at their cabin, her face tight with fear. The moment she saw Samuel's expression, she knew something had shifted. "What happened?" she asked softly, pulling him inside and closing the door. Samuel told her everything, the ritual, the presents, the bargain he had made. Rose listened without speaking, her hand gripping his. When he finished, she spoke with the same fierce strength he felt burning inside himself. "Whatever comes, we face it together," she said. "I would rather die free than live as property one more day. Tell me what must be done." In the days that followed, Samuel watched and waited with the patience of a hunter. The slave trader Hartwell had contacted was due to arrive the following Saturday to inspect Rose and complete the sale. That gave Samuel 1 week, 7 days, to carry out the plan taking shape in his mind, guided by the knowledge the spirits had given him. Hartwell kept his money in a safe in his study, something everyone on the plantation knew. What they did not know was that the combination changed every month and was known only to Hartwell. But Samuel, with his sharpened awareness, noticed something the master himself overlooked. Hartwell had a habit of practicing the new combination by opening and closing the safe again and again while alone, visible through the study window from a certain angle in the garden. Samuel began volunteering for garden work in the early evenings, choosing tasks that kept him near the house. He kept his head down, acting focused on weeding and trimming while secretly watching the study window. On Wednesday evening, his patience paid off. He saw Hartwell at the safe, watched his fingers move on the dial, counted the turns, memorized the pattern. The combination burned into Samuel's memory with unnatural clarity, a gift of the bargain he had made. But money alone would not be enough. They needed time, distance, and a distraction large enough to delay pursuit. Samuel knew that once they ran, and they would have to run, every white man in Harrison County would be hunting them. Dogs would be unleashed, patrols formed, roads watched. They needed something that would break Hartwell's control and buy precious hours. The answer came to Samuel on Thursday night with that same strange clarity, feeling both like his own thought and like knowledge placed into him. Fire, not a wild blaze that would kill the innocent or destroy the quarters where the enslaved lived, but a careful fire that would consume Hartwell's cotton barn. The massive building held 3 years of cotton harvest waiting for market, nearly all of Hartwell's liquid wealth. The barn stood on the far eastern edge of the plantation, far enough from the quarters and main house that a fire would not spread to living spaces. It was also poorly guarded. Hartwell's pride made him believe no enslaved person would dare damage his property, knowing the brutal punishment that would follow. The barn had a single old lock. Samuel had learned metal work from his father before being sold away from Louisiana. The lock was simple. He could pick it using tools he could make in the blacksmith shop where he sometimes worked. Friday night, Samuel lay awake beside Rose, turning the plan over in his mind again and again. Tomorrow was Saturday. The trader would arrive in the afternoon. Before dawn, Samuel would open the barn and place dry straw, lamp oil, and cotton in several spots inside. He would not light it yet. He would wait until evening, after the trader arrive. And negotiations began. The fire would do many things. It would destroy Hartwell's wealth. It would create chaos and delay any organized chase. And in that confusion, Samuel and Rose would take the money from the safe and vanish into the pine forest stretching north toward Indian territory. "Are you afraid?" Rose whispered in the dark. "Terrified," Samuel said. "But I'm more afraid of losing you than of anything that might happen to me. Tomorrow night, one way or another, we will no longer belong to Hartwell. We will be free, or we will be dead, but we will not be slaves." Rose was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "I saw my grandmother in a dream last night. She died before I was born, but my mother described her so many times that I know her face. She was smiling, Samuel. She said the spirits walk with you. Trust the old ways. I believe what you did in the woods was right. I believe our ancestors are helping us." Saturday rose clear and hot, the sun climbing blood-red over the pine forests. Samuel moved through his morning work with a sharp, focused awareness, every sound and movement feeling heavy with meaning, every step carrying him closer to a point from which there would be no turning back. Every sense was sharp, every moment loaded with meaning. He worked in the blacksmith shop, ostensibly fixing tools, but in truth shaping the lockpicks he would soon need. The blacksmith, An older enslaved man named Marcus watched silently, eyes knowing, but said nothing. Among the enslaved, there was an unspoken rule: you did not ask about matters you did not want forced answers to. Around mid-morning, a cloud of dust on the road signaled the slave trader's arrival. Samuel watched from a distance as the man rode up to the main house, a broad-shouldered white man in his 40s, mounted on a fine horse with 2 assistants trailing, leading a wagon. This was Tom. As Greer, one of East Texas's most notorious slave buyers, a man who thought nothing of breaking up families, judging human lives with the same detachment as livestock. Hartwell came out to greet him, shaking hands warmly as if they were old friends handling ordinary business. Samuel's stomach churned. They were discussing Rose as though she were a commodity, debating her worth, maybe even haggling over the price. The spirit's presence stirred inside Samuel, reminding him of his promise, strengthening his resolve. After lunch, the examination took place. Rose was brought from the fields, made to stand in the yard while Greer inspected her like a horse, checking her teeth, her hands, asking crude questions about her health and her history. Samuel worked nearby but forced himself to remain still. Any reaction could worsen the situation. Rose endured it quietly, her face calm, though Samuel could feel the humiliation gnawing at her. Greer seemed satisfied. Samuel could not hear the conversation clearly, but he saw the exchange of money, likely a down payment, the rest due upon delivery. Greer would stay overnight, departing the next morning with Rose in chains, exactly as Samuel had foreseen. Tonight, as Greer and Hartwell celebrated their transaction with wine and laughter, Samuel would put his plan into motion. The afternoon crawled. Samuel returned to the quarters early, feigning illness, claiming a headache from the heat. The overseer, drunk and indifferent on a Saturday, waved him off without a second thought. Inside the cabin, Samuel prepared his tools, lockpicks hidden in his clothing, a small bag for the stolen money, flint and steel for fire, and ritual objects from his mother for protection. Rose arrived as the sun dipped toward the horizon, excused from work since she was to be sold the next day. Hartwell, in a hollow gesture of generosity, even sent food from the main house, as if a good meal could atone for his crime. They ate in silence, neither with appetite, both conserving energy for what lay ahead. Night fell. From the main house came sounds of revelry, laughter, clinking glasses. Greer and Hartwell celebrated, oblivious. The other enslaved moved through their routines, unaware this night would change everything. "It's time," Samuel whispered as the moon rose over the pine trees, casting silver across the quarters. They had dressed in dark clothes, moving silently in shadows. Samuel carried the bag of tools and ritual items. Rose had packed what little they could bring, a knife, a waterskin, some dried food stolen over past days. They slipped from the cabin, keeping low. The quarters were mostly asleep, only old Jacob sitting outside with his pipe, watching them pass. He raised a hand, a silent farewell or blessing, then looked away. Whatever he suspected, he chose not to see. The cotton barn loomed against the night sky, a massive monument to years of enslaved labor. Samuel approached, eyes scanning for watchers. As he had suspected, Hartwell's arrogance left it unguarded. Why defend against theft when the enslaved who might steal had nowhere to sell cotton even if they took it? The lock yielded to Samuel's picks within minutes, his hands moving with practiced precision, guided by skill and the certainty the spirits had granted him. Inside, bales stacked to the rafters emitted the sweet, dusty smell of stored cotton. Hundreds of bales, each representing countless hours of brutal labor. Samuel worked quickly, arranging his accelerants, scattering loose cotton and straw to spread fire fast. Lamp oil stolen days earlier soaked strategic bales. He set everything to ensure the fire would consume the barn fully but burn outward, sparing the quarters. Even in vengeance, Samuel would not allow harm to the innocent. Rose stood guard at the door, tense, eyes scanning the darkness. "How much longer?" she whispered. "Almost done," Samuel said, finishing the last arrangements. "Once I light this, we'll have maybe 5 minutes before smoke is noticed. We need to reach the main house, in and out of the study, before anyone reacts." He struck flint against steel, sparks catching the oil-soaked straw. Flames leapt eagerly, quickly growing into a hungry blaze. Samuel and Rose slipped back, Samuel replacing the lock to make it appear untouched. Let Hartwell think it divine judgment, accident or lightning, anything but deliberate sabotage, at least until they were gone. They ran low across shadows toward the main house. Behind them, orange light flickered through gaps in the barn walls. They had perhaps 3 minutes. The main house was dark except for the study and dining room where Hartwell and Greer continued drinking and boasting. Samuel could hear their slurred voices, Greer recounting other purchases, Hartwell bragging about plantation output. Their casual cruelty, discussing human beings as commodities, hardened Samuel's resolve. He led Rose around back to a window he had slightly left ajar while working earlier. It opened into a storage room next to Hartwell's study. They slipped inside silently, amidst old furniture and supplies. Through the door, the men's voices were clearer, slurred but oblivious. Samuel moved to the door between storage and study, peeking through. The study was empty. Both men were in the dining room across the hall. The safe stood against the far wall, exactly as Samuel had memorized. He motioned for Rose to stay back, then crept inside, heart hammering, fingers finding the combination, left 3 times to 23, right twice to 47, left once to 15, right to 8, click. The door swung open, revealing stacks of bills, Hartwell's cash for supplies, overseers, and buying more human lives. Samuel's hands trembled, transferring the money into his bag. He was crossing a threshold, committing a crime in law's eyes. But what law? One that said Rose was property, one that valued profit over love. He rejected it all. Just as he closed the safe, a shout erupted outside. Fire had rear. Ched the cotton barn. Chaos erupted. Hartwell and Greer ran to the front, screaming, calling for overseers and enslaved people to form a bucket brigade. Samuel felt grim satisfaction. Let Hartwell feel powerless. Let him watch his wealth burn as he had burned countless lives. Samuel and Rose slipped back through the storage window, moving away from the main house into darkness. Enslaved people fought the fire, unaware of the 2 figures fleeing. The barn was fully ablaze, flames painting the night sky orange. Samuel could hear Hartwell's voice, desperate and furious, as silhouetted figures carried buckets, powerless against the inferno. At the forest's edge, Samuel paused for one last look back. The plantation that had imprisoned him for years burned against the night sky, the barn a pillar of fire, a symbol of vengeance and freedom. Clear's throat fire devouring 3 years of cotton harvest, erasing the wealth built on stolen labor. He sensed the spirits within him, felt their satisfaction at this small tipping of cosmic scales. Hartwell would be financially shattered, likely lose the plantation, fall from his place of power and privilege. It was not complete justice. Nothing could return the stolen years, the lives ruined, but it was something. If you're still with us following Samuel and Rose's desperate flight for freedom, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We are committed to sharing these powerful stories of resistance that history tried to erase. Leave a comment and share your thoughts on Samuel's choices. Was this justice or revenge? Where are you watching from? Your engagement helps these stories reach those who need to hear them. Rose tugged at his arm. We must go now before they notice we're gone. Samuel nodded, and together they vanished into the forest. The pine trees closed around them, offering concealment, and the first taste of what might, with luck and continued favor of the spirits, become freedom. They navigated north by the stars, using knowledge Samuel had gathered over years of hunting in these woods, during the rare moments enslaved people were allowed to supplement their meager rations. The forest at night was alive. Owls hunted, small animals rustled through undergrowth, the wind whispered through pine needles. Samuel and Rose moved as quickly as they dared, trying to create distance from the plantation while the chaos of the fire distracted everyone. By morning, when Greer discovered Rose missing and Hartwell realized his safe had been emptied, the hunt would begin in earnest. They pressed on through the night without pause, driven by fear and desperate hope. The money Samuel had taken, nearly $800, was more than most enslaved people ever saw in their lifetimes. It could buy passage north, sustain them while building new identities in a free state. But first, survival and evasion were paramount. They had to reach land beyond Hartwell's reach. At dawn, they finally paused in a thick thicket near a creek, about 10 miles from the plantation, not far enough, but they could not run without rest. They drank from the creek, ate some of the dried food Rose had carried, and allowed themselves a few hours of fitful sleep, taking turns watching. Samuel woke to Rose, shaking him urgently. The sun was high. They had slept longer than intended. "Listen," Rose whispered. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, baying hounds echoed. The hunt had begun. They ran again, following the creek to mask their scent, moving as fast as exhaustion allowed. The dogs' cries grew louder, closer. Hartwell had wasted no time organizing the pursuit. Naturally, a runaway who stole money and may have set fire to his cotton barn. Hartwell would chase them to the ends of the earth. The creek led north and east, deeper into the pine barrens. This was fortunate. The dense forest and twisting waterways would make tracking harder, but the dogs were trained, persistent, and Samuel knew they would eventually need to find a way to throw the hunters completely off. As they ran, Samuel prayed silently, invoking the spirits who had answered before. "Baron Samodi, who granted me this chance, do not abandon us now. Guide our steps, confuse our pursuers, grant the freedom you promised." By fortune or spiritual guidance, they stumbled upon Salvation, a small settlement of free black people, rare in East Texas but not unknown. These were individuals who had purchased their freedom or been freed by wills, creating a small community in the wilderness, farming and hunting, striving for lives beyond slavery. An older woman noticed them emerging from the forest, exhausted and terrified, and immediately understood. Without words, she led them into a cabin and hid them beneath a false floor, built for just such emergencies. The free black community lived with constant fear of kidnapping. Hidden rooms, false floors, and escape routes were essential. Within the hour, the dogs arrived, their baying filling the air as the hunters trampled through the settlement. Samuel and Rose lay perfectly still beneath the floorboards, barely breathing, listening to boots overhead. Hartwell's voice cut through, venomous, demanding to know if anyone had seen two fugitives, a man and a woman, dangerous criminals who stole property and burned a barn. The woman who hid them, Miriam, faced Hartwell with remarkable calm. "We've seen no runaways, sir," she said firmly, despite the guns aimed at her. "We are law-abiding free people registered with the county. We want no trouble." Hartwell doubted her, but the legal status of free black people, precarious though it was, offered some protection. He company old not destroy their homes without risking legal trouble he could not afford, especially with his finances suddenly unstable. The dogs sniffed the settlement, confused by the many scents of free people, unable to distinguish the fugitives. After what felt like hours, likely only 30 minutes, Hartwell and his men departed, heading north with the dogs. Samuel and Rose stayed hidden until night, when Miriam finally lifted the false floor and helped them out. Stiff and cramped from hours of stillness, they were alive and still free. "You cannot stay here," Miriam said bluntly, offering cornbread and beans. "Hartwell will return, maybe with the sheriff, maybe with night riders who ignore our free papers. Keep moving and be smarter." Her husband, Isaac, a grizzled man in his 60s who had bought freedom 30 years earlier, spread a crude map on the table. "Indian Territory is your best hope," he said, tracing a route. "About 80 miles northeast, the Cherokee Nation has sheltered runaway slaves before, and U.S. law doesn't reach them the same way. It won't be easy. You'll cross the Sabine River, travel rough country, avoid patrols and slave catchers, but if you succeed you might have a chance." Isaac gave better supplies, a real map, dried venison, blankets, and a pistol with 6 rounds. "Can you shoot?" he asked Samuel. "Well enough," Samuel admitted. Though he rarely handled guns, enslaved people were forbidden to own them, though he'd occasionally hunted with his master's rifle under supervision. "The Indian Territory," Rose murmured. "I've heard of it, but only as a dream, impossible to reach." "Nothing's impossible," Miriam said, covering Rose's hand with hers. "My mother was stolen from Africa. She never knew freedom, but she told stories of our homeland and made me promise never to accept slavery as natural. You two are fulfilling that dream, fighting for freedom. The spirits of all our ancestors walk with you." Under darkness, they left the settlement, following Isaac's route. The journey to Indian Territory would take them through perilous East Texas, dense forests harboring outlaws, swamps where people vanished, countless opportunities to encounter slave patrols or bounty hunters. Yet it offered something Samuel and Rose had never truly known: hope. For 3 nights they traveled, moving mostly under cover of darkness, hiding by day, following game trails and creeks, avoiding roads and settlements, living off Isaac's provisions supplemented by foraging. Samuel felt the Spirit's presence constantly, guiding choices, warning of danger, granting endurance when exhaustion threatened. On the fourth day, they faced their first true obstacle, a swollen river, rushing fast and deep. One of the Sabine's tributaries. They had to cross it to continue northeast. Rose stared, fearful. "I can't swim," she admitted. "Never learned." Samuel scanned for a shallow crossing or a fallen tree. The Spirit's presence urged him to a spot 100 yards upstream, where the river bent around a rocky outcrop. Something drew him there. They reached the outcrop. A massive cypress had fallen across the river, forming a natural bridge, thick enough to walk on carefully, though terrifying above the rushing water. "I'll go first," Samuel said. "Check stability. Then I'll come back for you." He stepped onto the trunk, arms outstretched, moving slowly. Moss made the bark slick. The trunk shifted slightly under his weight. The water's roar tried to distract him, but he made it across and returned for Rose. "Hold on to me," he said. "Don't look down. Focus on the opposite bank. I won't let you fall." Rose clutched him tightly, and together they edged across the fallen. Halfway across, Rose's foot slipped on the wet bark, and for a heart stop, moment, she began to fall. Samuel caught her, pulling her close, steadying them both. They froze on the tree trunk, the water roaring beneath them, both gasping for breath. "I've got you," Samuel whispered. "We're almost there, just a little farther." They finished crossing and collapsed on the far bank, shaking from the tension. But they had succeeded, one more obstacle passed, one step closer to the Indian Territory and the hope of freedom. That night they set up camp in a dense cluster of pine trees, allowing a small fire for the first time since leaving the settlement. As they warmed themselves, Rose spoke softly. "Do you think we'll make it?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he admitted. "But we are farther from Hartwell's plantation than I ever imagined. Because of what we did, Hartwell is probably financially ruined. The spirits have guided us this far and haven't left us. Even if we are caught tomorrow, we have these days of freedom, moments where we belong to ourselves alone. That's more than many enslaved people ever get." Rose moved closer to him, and they sat together, staring into the small fire. "Tell me what it will be like," she said. "If we make it to the Indian Territory, what life will we have?" Samuel allowed himself a small smile, imagining it for the first time. "We'll find a spot to build a cabin, maybe near a creek. I'll hunt and fish. You'll grow a garden, herbs, vegetables, maybe flowers just for beauty. We'll have children born free, who will never know what it means to be owned. We'll grow old together, watching the seasons change, living peacefully." "That sounds like heaven," Rose whispered. "It's what should have been everyone's birthright," Samuel said. "But we were born into a world that denied us that right. Now we fight to claim it." The next morning brought an unexpected encounter. They were moving through a more open part of the forest when voices came ahead. Samuel signaled Rose to hide while he crept forward. What he saw made his blood run cold. A group of 5 white men, heavily armed, scanning the ground like hunters tracking prey. "Slave catchers." Samuel quietly returned to Rose. "Bounty hunters ahead, maybe 50 yards. They're tracking something. Could be us, could be someone else. Either way, we need to circle around without being seen." They moved carefully through the underbrush, giving the hunters a wide berth, but luck, which had been with them, suddenly turned. A twig snapped beneath Rose's foot, sharp as a gunshot. "There!" one hunter shouted. Samuel and Rose ran through the trees. Behind them, they heard the hunters crashing through the forest, shouting, the baying of a dog following. The chase had begun, and there was no friendly settlement to hide in, no river crossing to slow their pursuers. They ran with the desperate speed of those who knew capture meant more than losing freedom. It could mean death. Hartwell would show no mercy to slaves who had stolen from him and destroyed his cotton. At best, they might be sent to brutal sugar plantations in Louisiana, where life expectancy was measured in years. At worst, public execution would serve as an example to others. Samuel felt the spirits within him, giving him clarity amid panic. He saw a steep ravine ahead, thick with vegetation. "This way!" he shouted, and they plunged over, sliding and grasping roots to slow their fall. They landed hard but unbroken and moved quickly along the ravine bed. The hunters reached the edge and debated whether to follow. The ravine bought them precious minutes and led them to a cave, partly hidden by vines. Samuel pulled Rose inside, scrambling deep into the darkness. The cave was shallow, barely enough to hide, but it would suffice. The hunters passed close to the entrance, so ear Samuel could have touched them. Rose squeezed his hand in the dark. They held still, silent. One hunter paused, muttering, "Thought I saw something." Samuel's hand moved to the pistol Isaac had given him. If discovered, he would not let Rose be taken. But the companion called the hunter forward. "Come on, we'll lose him if we don't hurry." The footsteps faded. Samuel and Rose remained frozen for an hour, ensuring the hunters had moved on. They had survived again, but Samuel knew their luck couldn't last forever. They emerged as twilight painted the sky purple and orange, moving cautiously. The ravine led northeast, the direction they needed, and they followed it for miles. Samuel's body ached and Rose's exhaustion was clear, but they could not stop. Not while hunters were near. Near midnight, they finally rested in a dense thicket of palmetto and pine, eating the last of their dried venison, rationing water. Isaac's map suggested they were about 30 miles from the Indian Territory, 2 or 3 more days if they kept moving and avoided trouble. "Samuel," Rose said quietly, preparing for their sleep shifts, "what you did with the spirits, do you think there will be consequences, beyond what we already face?" Samuel had been thinking of this since the ritual. The presence he felt, the bargain he made. Such things came at a cost. "I don't know," he admitted. "My mother warned me the spirits grant power but demand payment. I offered whatever was asked. I suppose I'll learn the meaning in time. Do you regret it?" Samuel looked at the woman he loved enough to risk everything and shook his head. "No, even if it costs my life, I don't regret it. You're free, Rose. That alone is worth any price." Rose leaned against him, and they listened to the night forest. "When we reach the Indian Territory," she said, "I want to learn the old ways, the things your mother taught. Why? Oh, the connection to ancestors and spirits. I want that knowledge to survive. I'll teach you everything I know," Samuel promised. "And our children, if we are blessed." The spirits crossed oceans with our people, survived slavery's attempts to erase our culture. We'll keep it alive. The next morning brought heavy fog, hiding them but confusing navigation. Samuel relied on his sense of direction and guidance from the spirits. The fog lasted most of the day, lifting in the late afternoon to reveal changing terrain. Fewer pines, more hardwoods, signs of new territory. They came upon a small creek and stopped to refill water skins. Samuel knelt by the water and saw a carved tree marker, the type used by the Underground Railroad to guide fugitives north. They were on a freedom trail. Following the markers, they reached a small homestead as evening fell. An older black man was chopping wood outside a modest cabin and paused when he saw them emerge. His eyes took in their raggedness and exhaustion. "You're running," he said simply. "Yes," Samuel replied, "to the Indian Territory. We left Harrison County nearly a week ago." The man Josiah welcomed them, fed them properly for the first time since leaving Miriam and Isaac's settlement. His wife Ruth tended Rose's blistered feet, while Josiah spoke quietly with Samuel. "The Cherokee Nation will take you in," he confirmed. "It's not perfect freedom. Some Cherokee owned slaves, though generally they treated them better than white owners. Others will hide fugitives, even intermarry with them. It's complicated, but it's better than what you're escaping." He showed Samuel a more detailed map than Isaac's, highlighting the safest route and helpful contacts. "You're close," Josiah said. "Maybe 20 miles to the border, but those last miles will be the most dangerous. This area sees many bounty hunters, and the Cherokee Nation patrols its borders. You need to approach carefully and make sure you contact the right people." They stayed with Josiah and Ruth for 2 days, resting and regaining their strength, letting their bodies recover from the grueling journey. Ruth washed their clothes, gave them better supplies, and even provided Rose with a dress that fit properly, the first new clothing Rose had worn in years. Josiah gave Samuel detailed instructions on who to seek out once they crossed into Cherokee territory. "There's a man named Ridge Walker," Josiah said. "He's Cherokee, married to a black woman who escaped slavery. He helps fugitives find work, settle safely, and protects them from bounty hunters. If you can reach him, you'll be as safe as you can get." The morning they left, Ruth hugged Rose tightly. "You're almost there, child," she whispered. "Almost free. Don't give up now." The final part of their journey took them through wilder terrain, forests so thick little sunlight reached the ground, swamps where the earth seemed to shift beneath their feet. They saw signs of human presence, old campsites, faint smoke in the distance, but avoided contact, unwilling to risk exposure so close to freedom. On what Samuel figured was the 13th day since fleeing Hartwell's plantation, they reached the Sabine River. This was the boundary, the line between United States territory and the Cherokee Nation. Across the water lay a place where Hartwell's warrant and American slave laws carried far less weight. The river stretched wide, perhaps 200 yards, running swift and dark. They followed it north for several hours, searching for a crossing, until they found what looked like a regular ford, a spot where the water ran shallower and the banks showed signs of travelers. "This is it," Samuel said, feeling the spirit's presence confirm his choice. "We cross here." They waded into the river as afternoon light filtered through the trees, the water rising to their waists, then their chests. The current tried to sweep them downstream, but they fought forward, step by grueling step. Samuel held Rose's hand tightly, refusing to let the water separate them, not when freedom waited on the other. Bang! Halfway across, Samuel heard a shout behind them. He turned to see riders on the Texas side of the river, 3 men on horseback. Even from this distance, Samuel recognized the lead rider's posture and presence. Hartwell had caught up at last. "Stop!" Hartwell yelled across the water. "You're still in United States territory. Stop or I'll shoot." Samuel and Rose pushed on desperately. The opposite bank seemed almost within reach. Behind them, the sound of horses splashing into the water grew closer. Hartwell was chasing them, even into the river. A gunshot cracked across the current. The bullet struck to Samuel's left, spraying water upward. Rose stumbled, and for a terrifying moment, Samuel feared she'd been hit, but she regained her footing, fear propelling her forward. They reached the shallow edge on the Cherokee side and scrambled up the bank, dripping and gasping. Samuel looked back to see Hartwell mid-river, his horse struggling against the current, his face twisted in rage. But he had stopped. The boundary was real, and even Hartwell knew pursuing fugitives into Cherokee Nation territory was not the same as hunting them in Texas. "I'll find you," Hartwell shouted. "I'll offer a reward so high every bounty hunter will search for you. You'll never be safe, never be free." Samuel felt the spirit surge one last time, words rising from somewhere deeper than his conscious mind. When he spoke, his voice carried across the water with a clarity that made even Hartwell's horse rear. "You have no power over us anymore, Nathaniel Hartwell. Your wealth is ashes. Your authority is over. The spirits of all you enslaved and murdered curse you. You will die broken and alone, unmourned and unforgiven. This is the harvest of your cruelty. We are free, and you are nothing." The words seemed to strike Hartwell physically. His face went pale, fear replacing rage. The master, once so powerful and untouchable, now appeared small and helpless, screaming threats from a river he could not cross. Samuel turned, Rose beside him, and walked into the Cherokee Nation, leaving Hartwell's curses behind. They walked another hour before encountering their first Cherokee patrol. 3 men on horseback studied them cautiously. Samuel explained their situation, mentioning Ridge Walker's name as Josiah had instructed. The lead rider's eyes lit with recognition. "Ridge Walker's settlement is a day's walk north," he said in English tinged with a Cherokee accent. "I'll take you there. You'll be safe. We don't return fugitives to American slave catchers." That evening, as they neared Ridge Walker's small settlement, a community of Cherokee families and escaped slaves, Samuel and Rose saw smoke from cooking fires, heard children playing, and watched people live their lives without chains, overseers, or the constant threat of separation. It wasn't perfect. Samuel already noticed the complexities Josiah had warned about, the compromises and challenges of this new life. But it was freedom, as close as they could reach in a world still dominated by slavery. Ridge Walker himself came out to meet them, a tall Cherokee man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "You're safe here," he said simply. "Rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about building your life." That night, lying beside Rose in a real bed in the cabin Ridge Walker provided, Samuel allowed himself to believe they had made it. The journey that began with a desperate ritual in the woods had carried them across more than 100 miles of dangerous land, through pursuit and moments when death seemed certain. The spirits had kept their promise, guiding them to a place where they could begin again. "Thank you," Samuel whispered into the darkness, unsure if he was speaking to Rose, the spirits, his ancestors, or all of them together. "Thank you," Rose replied, finding his hand. "We did it. We're actually free." "We are," Samuel confirmed, "and tomorrow we start building the life we dreamed of." Outside, the Cherokee Nation stretched into darkness. It was not perfect or paradise, but it offered something Samuel and Rose had never truly possessed: the chance to determine their own destiny, to live as human beings rather than property, to build a future on their own terms. The fire that consumed Hartwell's cotton barn had burned away their chains. The stolen money had funded their escape. The spirits had guided them to safety. Justice, imperfect and incomplete, but real, had been served. Samuel and Rose, once enslaved, once treated as less than human, marked for separation and sale, now stood on free soil, ready to write the next chapter of their story with their own hands.